New cities are becoming popular. All of them claim to be sustainable, but are they really? As the world's first permaculture urbanist, I've noticed some mistakes that new cities keep making that ruin their claims of sustainability. So today, I'll walk you through 5 of these errors and what cities should do instead. Welcome to Edenicity, best practices for sustainably abundant cities. Mistake number 1. This is the classic type 1 error from old school permaculture, and that is clearing wilderness for human habitation. And by wilderness, I'm thinking in very broad terms. This can be coral reef, wetlands, tidal flats, jungle, steppe, savanna, drylands, even a lot of what we would consider desert today. The problem, and I should probably trademark this phrase by now, is that humans already occupy half the land on Earth, and not coincidentally, we have wiped out half the living biomass of Earth. And even though cities only occupy 2% of the land, they'll house at least 68% of the world's population by mid-century. And even better from a design perspective is that existing cities already have plenty of room for new growth. Therefore, instead of clearing wilderness for entirely new cities, we need to rezone nearly all urban areas to include multifamily housing. Now, you might be thinking this is impossible in your city, and you might be right. Some cities are set up to do this more easily than others. For example, Tokyo has very simplified zoning that allows housing in 11 out of the 12 possible zones. I learned this from a video I saw on the Critical Dispatch channel, and it was excellent. I've linked it in the description. There's a lot cities can learn from each other, and this is a perfect example. Mistake number 2 is that cities try too hard to accommodate cars. Advocates for transit and active transportation, such as bicycling and walking, a lot of times try to sell those modes of transportation with very inclusive language, saying we need to design streets for all possible uses. And of course, what this means is much wider, bigger streets. But look, that's not good design. Good design requires good decisions, and decide literally means to cut off the less desirable alternatives. Public transit has proven to be 17 to 20 times safer, 10 to 30 times more space efficient, and up to 25 times more energy efficient than cars and roads. In a world where we're facing mass human-made extinctions that are bound to come back and bite us at some point, it is unethical to persist with car infrastructure. In this image, for example, behind that stranded pedestrian in the middle of the intersection, you'll see a tram. And that tram has many times more capacity than all of the private cars that are visible in the image. That's a travesty. And cities need to act immediately to replace lanes and parking with public and active transit, as well as housing and gardens. Now, if you're new to Edenicity, you're probably thinking, well, what about emergency vehicles? What about service vehicles or deliveries? I've actually covered that in detail in a prior episode that I'll link at the end of this episode. But the short answer to that is that at higher density, you can have much slower moving, much lower power electric vehicles that get the job done, with much greater safety and much less energy use. As an example of cities turning away from cars, in the past few years, Paris, France has pedestrianized hundreds of streets around grade schools. And again, there's an excellent video on this, which I've linked in the description. Mistake number 3, vertical or underground farms. These stacked skyscraper farms or underground indoor farms have been popular in nearly every publication about the future of cities, including the Cities issue of National Geographic from a few years ago. Let me set the record straight on that. Vertical construction costs $2,500 to $9,000 per square meter. With farms, you're lucky if you're making $200 per square meter per year, and the margins are low, so you don't get to keep all of that money. In practical terms, this means that skyscraper farms would take 50 years or more to break even. It just doesn't make any economic sense at all. As for underground farms, Square Roots, a company launched by Elon Musk's brother, Kimball Musk, has been able to grow 160 kilograms of greens per month on 32 square meters in a shipping container. It reportedly consumes 100 kilowatt hours per day, which works out to about 100 solar panels at 1.5 square meters per panel, or 150 square meters. That's 5 times the area of the shipping container, and the yield is not that much higher than intensive small organic gardening techniques, such as the John Jevons grow-intensive method. Therefore, in practical terms, what cities should do instead is grow food in the landscape or, at most, on rooftops. The key idea here is that it's much more efficient to grow directly in sunlight. Mistake number 4, commoditizing water. Now, economics textbooks like to compare water and gold to teach students about pricing. Water is much more valuable than gold, but it's also much more plentiful, so the price is lower. And you just know that all the billionaire wannabes in those classes go, what if water were scarce? And start thinking about ways to introduce or at least capitalize on the scarcity of water as if it were a commodity like gold. The problem is that water is not inanimate. Water is integral to life. Forests seed clouds. They condense and precipitate a large amount of water from their leaves at night. They buffer floods and droughts. They recharge groundwater, and they even green deserts. To me, it's incredible that more people don't know these things, because I grew up on an island where in elementary school, I think by 5th grade at the very latest, we took field trips into the rainforest where water supply officials showed us how the rainforest was essential and integral to the supply of water that we enjoyed, which at the time was the cleanest water in the United States. Now, you may have heard in the news that water is getting scarce, but I would maintain that water is only becoming scarce because life is becoming scarce. Remember, we've wiped out half the living biomass of the planet by occupying half the surface area with monocrop agriculture and other uses that destroy natural habitats. And if we bring the earth back to life, we'll have all the water we need. This is why water, landscape, and plantings must be designed together and maintained together in cities. Mistake number 5, ignoring landscape. We learn in permaculture about pattern understanding, and this is not something that's taught in many academic disciplines, but it's core to many indigenous systems of understanding the world and core to maintaining the environments in which many indigenous cultures sustain themselves. Landscapes are shaped by cosmic and geological forces, daily and seasonal sun exposure, tectonics, tides, climate, and weather. Ignoring these forces in the built environment, as you can see here in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, is a disaster. Instead, cities need to design earthworks, that is, the areas that are shaped by large digging tools, structures such as commercial and residential buildings, and plantings to direct water, wind, and nutrients toward beneficial ends. And on the other hand, to protect against harm from fires, floods, dust, and drought, as well as storms. Without naming names, if you look at any new utopian city design that is meant to go in a particular place and it does not harmonize with that specific landscape, you know it's destined to fail. In summary, cities should not clear wilderness. They just need to rezone built areas for higher density. Cities should not accommodate cars. Instead, they need to replace streets and parking with active and public transit, housing, and green spaces. Cities should not build vertical or underground farms. Instead, they need to use direct sunlight, which makes much better use of space and energy than any technology invented to date. Cities should not commoditize water. Instead, they need to integrate it with layered, biodiverse urban ecosystems. And finally, cities should not ignore landscape. Instead, they should work with it for resource security and safety. Now, that's a lot of shoulds, and if you're new to Edenicity, this may sound a little heavy-handed, top-down, and bossy. But the whole point of Edenicity is that it's meant to compete in a world where people have choices. My thesis is that cities that intensify their efforts along the directions that I've pointed out in this video will become places that more people want to live. And cities that fail to do these things are going to be cities that people will move out of and avoid. And it's on. Cities like Vienna, Singapore, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and Paris are just a few of the many that are independently Edenizing right now. And these efforts are making them enormously more popular places to live. How does your city stack up? Now, Edenicity is not just an ideal for an Edenic city, it's also a measure of economic plus ecological abundance. Did you know that you can rate the Edenicity of the city you're living in right now? When you join the Edenicity membership that's linked in the description, you'll be able to rate the Edenicity and put it on a world map on our website. It's my hope and belief that over time, the Edenicity rating system will encourage cities to move more in this direction. If this sounds like something you'd like to be a part of, I invite you to subscribe if you haven't already and check out the membership link in the description. And as always, the schematic Edenicity reference design is available as a free download. And here are those other episodes that I mentioned earlier. Take care, stay green, see you next time.